This is the slide that I think kind of captures the spirit of the conference we've had over the last 2 days. Started out by positing, arguing, that actually what Lean is about is managing by science, as opposed to the old scientific management and Taylorism that, as Michael said, made a valid contribution, but got so far. And got so far because it was actually only tapping the skills and the knowledge of a fraction of the workforce, the experts and the managers, and was missing the contribution of people involved in the work itself. And I think that what we're doing is engaging everybody in managing by science. That is really the contribution. And where the academics, I think, have gone wrong, and I think some of the gurus, in feeding the current investor capitalism myth, is simply trying to correlate, tick boxes of lean practices and the correlation with performance, as though there was some unique, if you do all these things, you will get these performance results. And my point earlier was that misses the key point of Lean, which I think has been emphasized by a lot of the speakers. Mike Ballet, the two Mikes, is that actually Lean is about building the capabilities, is about rewiring the neural networks, if you like to take Mike's vision, and I think there's an awful lot in that. I think the turning something from slow thinking into fast thinking, practicing to reconfigure our neural networks so we're in a comfort zone and don't have to consciously think about doing the things, the core things that we've learned and practiced. I think that's actually what we're talking about. We're actually talking about, and Michael phrased it a different way. Michael, rightly, and I really experienced this, makes us aware of the fact that we are constantly looking at the world through a set of spectacles that reflects the neural networks that we built and the assumptions we've grown up with. And an awful lot of the learning process, the practice process, is confronting that and challenging that and recognizing that the world is actually sometimes upside down, many times upside down from how we assume the world operates. And learning when we're wrong is an extraordinarily powerful way, a powerful trigger for that practice then, having had the aha moment of, I thought my hunch was that this is the way this problem would be solved. And I've had it time and time again, and I think we've all had this time and time again, where we thought this was the answer, and we confronted it with reality, and it didn't work quite like that. It's not the answer we expected. It's not a confirmation that we were right. In fact, it's a challenge to ask the question of, well, what's wrong with my assumption? What is wrong with the solution I have in mind? And in my experience, then the trick is to find a sensei and to confront this and to ask some questions, which of course gives the sensei an understanding of what you're struggling with and allows him or her to then ask the trenchant question, the really pertinent question that will enable you to recognize why what you thought about was actually 180 degrees wrong. And immediately he does that, and immediately you go away and reflect on that, you see, aha, now I see why the world is upside down on that particular issue, and I've got it wrong. Having done that and reflected on that, then you can move forward. And that, I think, is an awful lot about what the Lean experience is all about. And so actually we want to spend quite a bit of time coaching, learning by doing, but not just plan, do, plan, do, plan, do. The critical part of this is check, act. And I like the can-do version of PDCA. I think it is much more relevant and is much more, captures the scientific method. Takashi talked about it. Mark Baker has been badgering us for years on this point, and he's absolutely dead right. Unless we can systematically check and reflect, then we are not able to frame the question around which we can then build a plan. So I think this learning by doing process, TWI was an extraordinary step forward. And it's still a mystery to me how that happened and where the intellectual antecedents were and how that happened. But the crisis of the Second World War brought together the right people to address an absolutely urgent need, which was to replace a workforce that was now fighting in the front with another workforce that had never had experience of working in an industrial setting and doing that in a hurry. And that learning by doing, that job instruction process, we were arguing about the word instruction and coaching beforehand. That job instruction process, with the richness of that instruction experience, that is actually the core foundation of the learning process that Toyota uses. So that's really kind of interesting. And I do think this must cause us to reflect on our role as lean champions, practitioners, whatever. And I think in the early days of lean, we were trying to kind of create examples to attract attention to prove the case. And so in many cases, we had to go in and actually create the examples ourselves with others and help. And we were focused on creating the examples rather than on the learning process. Because we were so desperate to show that this worked and to learn ourselves that this works. And we spent years doing those things as well. And at some point, then you come up against the fact that I've been doing it. I have management which is maybe saying, do it for me. And we've gone off and done. And it hasn't stuck and it hasn't learnt. And so now we have to change our role, we have to change tack, and we have to move away from the traditional Taylorist expert, staff-driven profession of experts telling people what to do and doing it for them, or doing it to them. And we have to change. Now is the time to change gear and to reflect on the purpose of our lean activities. And recognizing that the target of our lean activities is actually line management. Lean is a line management responsibility. It is not a staff responsibility. Particularly as we understand this coaching and mentoring and instruction activity that we're now engaged in. And recognizing that we can only judge its success, on the one hand, by how well we can gauge the learning process that's gone on, the capabilities that people have developed through this process. And the second way of judging it is, are they able to use that learning process to continue and build on what you left, the foundation you built? And so I think the challenge of these few days is, on the one hand, to understand the purpose, the learning purpose of lean, the thinking production system, the learning production system, whatever you like to call it. And the second, also to begin to challenge and question our role as lean leaders. I think there's tons to be done. I don't totally agree with Michael that there's no job left for lean guys. We've planted a lot of seeds. A lot of people are genuinely liberated through their lean experiences. Ask them whether they want to go back. And when they react by saying, no way, this is so much better, I'm beginning to have control, I'm beginning to be respected, I'm beginning to be listened to, I am beginning to able to improve my own work as well as just be asked to come and do the work every day. That's really rewarding, and that signals that something has happened. So I think that's a big challenge for us now over the next few years is to actually rethink our purpose and turn ourselves more into facilitators and coaches and mentors, whatever language you like to use. But recognizing our purpose is to build the capabilities that can solve tomorrow's problems. And we're in a world in which we're going to have to react more quickly. It is more uncertain. The challenges are not going to be as predictable as they were in the past. So that problem-solving capability at all levels in an organization is going to be more and more important. So that's a challenge. And I would say that challenge takes us away from the traditional path, which would have been towards professionalization of Lean. And I would say we all need, as Lean practitioners, to go off and do. So a rotation out of our Lean role is an extremely important part of our learning process. And rotation in and so on. So I think that's an important lesson. So the role of Lean teams, the role of helping people learn and to build capabilities, I think, is a core. If there's only one thing you take away from the conference, is rethinking your role and how you think about Lean. If you do that, this conference has earned it's the time that you spent here. We've also heard about some very interesting frontier issues about leadership. And I think the research we have done simply uncovering the landscape of Lean and the different contributions people have made to Lean and creating a process where we can make that conscious. We can make people self-conscious of their own organization's approach to leadership and their own personal approach to leadership. That is yielding a lot of rich insights. I think there's a lot more to go to understanding how we not only understand leadership, but we also begin to think about the language from the leader's perspective downwards. And that's why I think Michael has started the debate about building a business case for Lean, which is a bit challenging to the Lean community, who have not been able really, or not been very good at expressing the results of Lean in anything more than cost savings. And I think it's a big, big wake-up call that Michael makes to say those are essentially fictitious and maybe not sustainable. And that explains why CEOs glaze over when you tell them about cost savings, even however well you've documented those cost savings. And the only real money is money that is transacted at the boundaries of the organization. When we buy something and they pay for something. And so it's a connection between the real money, either in terms of growth opportunities, through better quality, better customer satisfaction, or it's through freeing up cash by compressing time, or it's by reducing costs, by leveling demand and reducing the capacity we need to make that demand, or it's through the big leap, which I think is redesigning the next generation product, service, process, supply chain, tooling, based upon what we now know about our current broken processes and product designs, that reveals that we can actually design the next gen. Both frees up cash for innovation, but also reveals that we can actually achieve a solution tomorrow that requires less cash, less capital expenditure. So if we bear those four things in mind, sales growth, freeing up cash, reducing costs and capacity, and freeing up capital expenditure, if we can link our activities from that perspective, from the perspective of the needs of the organization, that will be one major step forward. But we have to change our language from the Lean language to the language of business. And the other thing that Michael, we were talking about, particularly in Paris last week, which is, I think, a frontier issue, is talking about how we understand the definition of customer value. How we really grapple with the subtleties of how customers, what customers' circumstances are in which they're trying to solve problems in their lives or in their situations, that we are producing products and services to help them achieve that, solve those problems. And that is particularly a frontier issue when we're thinking about the redesign of the next generation product and process, is that we need to redouble our ability to really grasp the process of really subtly defining value and the gap between what we currently offer and what we could offer. Defining value from the customer's perspective with our knowledge of our current broken processes and the opportunities we have there. And that takes me to a final piece which I think is extremely important as well, is the whole organization, not just of the production operations and the transaction processing operations, which we're very familiar with, but this whole question of lean project management, whether it's in product development, whether it's deploying a lean project as a deployment lead, that whole question of how, not just lean project management, because there's good project management out there, but what is the process and the behaviors and the whole, how do we deepen our understanding of working together in a project environment at an executive cross-functional level? And I have a hunch that there's an awful lot more for us to learn about that as well. And starting where Takashi started in terms of product development is a great place to start. And Takashi began talking also about extending this into the executive office when he talked about the Boeing experience 2 years ago. Gave us a taste with a bit of Jinglish for his latest thinking about digital Obeya and so on. I think there's a hell of a lot more that we can learn about the project management process itself. And I hope you will engage with us as we begin to maybe create groups to think about this. These are issues where we have hunches. I have hunches about what I think will work. I'm expecting some of those to be completely falsified. As we dig into practical, real situations, and as we conduct experiments, as we design and carry out experiments, and in particular, and when we have the time and the space and create the conditions where with other senseis or with other mentors, with other people who are deeply involved, we can actually reflect on the results. And the interesting thing is, and I'm sure this is the case, we will not find one answer. There will not be one way. That is also the case with lean. Not only is every circumstance specific, but the way you challenge people to think about that circumstance can be done from several different perspectives. So you have the scene we've seen often of the warring senseis. Even in Toyota, absolutely in Toyota, who actually agree with 95% of what we're talking about, but violently disagree about 5%. And to me, it was a liberation, and I wish I'd recognized this before, when John Shook sent that email out the other day talking about warring senseis, and that is the point. They deliberately train senseis to come from different perspectives and to challenge each other, because there's always a richness in challenging and looking at a situation from different perspectives. Certainly at the marketplace, we are not looking at one size fits all, one channel fits all. That's part of the legacy of mass production. So I don't expect there's going to be one way in which everybody's going to manage projects. But there are going to be common elements in how we do that and how we learn through that process of project management that are common. And that brings us back to how we can be scientific. not about the specific results, but how we can be scientific about reflecting on the learning process that we're using those specific solutions for those results for. So I think that Lean is a major step forward in management beyond Taylorism that applies the scientific thinking to engaging everyone in learning how to solve their current problems and solve tomorrow's problems based upon learning how to solve the problems. So I hope that this conference has given you food for thought. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of slightly different words, but actually an extraordinarily, more than I expected, an extraordinarily common kind of vision that we're beginning to paint of the future of Lean. I have heard in the past people say, well, you know, Lean's is a wave and is going to, flatten out or professionalize or die. I've never been convinced about that. It could go that way. It absolutely could go that way. But if we're intensely interested in what we don't know, in testing what we think we know, and in defining the questions for tomorrow, I think Lean's got a long way to go. And Lean will fulfill what I believe is its mission of changing the way we all think at work and changing the way in which we all work together in societies to solve our problems, and in which we learn to create more fulfilling value in our lives. So that, I think, is a noble and not a small ambition. But this makes Lean a challenging and interesting space in which to work.